It's 1926, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Somewhere inside a film storage vault belonging to a man named Federico Valle, a fire starts. Nobody knows exactly how. Nitrate film was stored everywhere in that era, stacked in canisters, pressed together in wooden shelves, and nitrate film doesn't just burn, it combusts. It generates its own oxygen. You can't smother it, you can't put it out with water. Once it goes, it's gone. And in that fault, on that night, what burned was not just film. What burned was the only existing copy of the first animated feature film ever made. 70 minutes of handcraft animation, 58,000 individual drawings, 9 years of work, gone in an hour. And the man who made it, most of you guys don't even know his name. But before we talk about what we lost, let me tell you who made it. His name was Quirino Cristiani, born July 2nd, 1896, in a small town in northern Italy called Santa Giulietta. His father was a municipal secretary who lost his job, so in 1900, when Quirino was only 4 years old, his family packed up and moved to Argentina. Buenos Aires at the turn of the century was one of the fastest growing cities on earth. Immigrants were pouring in from Italy, Spain, Eastern Europe. The city was loud, chaotic, political, alive, and it had newspaper culture that was absolutely savage. Editorial cartoons, political caricatures, satirical magazines that pulled no punches about whoever was in power. Quirino grew up drawing. By the time he was a teenager, he was sketching caricatures of politicians for local papers. He had a gift. You could look at one of his drawings and immediately know exactly who he was mocking. The exaggerated jaw, the puffed up chest, the ridiculously pompous posture of whatever government official had made the news that week. And that's when Federico Valle found him. Valle was an Italian-born, like Cristiani. He built a small film empire in Buenos Aires. He owned a production company called Patria Film, and he was one of the first people in Argentina making newsreels, short documentary clips of current events, screened in cinemas before the main feature. Think of it as the 1910s version of a news broadcast, except you had to leave your house to see it. Valle had an eye for talent. He'd seen Cristiani's caricatures in the newspapers, and he had an idea. What if we animated them? Not just one drawing held still on screen, actually animated, frame by frame, the way the film itself worked. Except instead of photographing real people, you photograph drawings. One drawing, then move it slightly, photograph it again, over and over, thousands of times, until the drawing appeared to move. The concept wasn't new. Animated shorts had been around for a decade at this point. Emile Cole in France, Winsor McKay in America, they pioneered the technique. Short clips, a few minutes long, novelties, party tricks. But Vale's idea was bigger than a party trick. He didn't want a short film, he wanted a feature. Now here's what I want you to sit for a second, because I think people hear animated film and their brain fills in something modern, computer rendering, digital software, teams of hundreds of artists working in a studio with air conditioning and decent chairs. Quirino Cristiani made this film with cardboard, scissors, a camera, and his hands. The technique he used was cutout animation. He drew his characters, cut them into articulate pieces like paper dolls with movable arms and legs and heads. He would lay them on a flat table under the camera, position them carefully, take a photograph, move them a fraction of an inch, take another photograph, again, 58,000 times. At 14 frames per second, the finished film ran approximately 70 minutes. To put that in perspective, a professional animator today working digitally on a full production is expected to produce about 5 to 10 seconds of finished animation per week. Quirino Cristiani worked largely by hand with a small team, produced every 70 minutes for a film that premiered in 1917. And the character designs weren't even his. The caricatures were drawn by a famous Buenos Aires cartoonist named Diogenes Taborda, nicknamed El Mono, who was already well known for his savage political drawings in the press. Cristiani took Taborda's drawings, converted them into the articulated cutouts, and did the actual animation himself. What was the film actually about? The target was Hipólito Yrigoyen, president of Argentina. He's just been elected in 1916, the first Argentine president chosen under universal male suffrage, which was actually a genuinely big deal. Argentina had reformed its voting laws 4 years earlier, and Urigen was the result. A populist, a reformer, a man the public had put enormous hope in. And like most politicians who received enormous hope from the public, he immediately started disappointing them. The satirical cartoon press was already having a field day with him. He had a nickname, El Peludo, which translates roughly as the hairy one or the armadillo. He was known for being reclusive, secretive, slow to act, surrounded by loyalists, and Buenos Aires cartoonists were merciless. So Cristiani and Valle made him the star of the world's first animated feature film. Here's the plot. Urigen dies. He ascends to Mount Olympus, dressed as an apostle, hence the title, El Apóstol, the Apóstol. He approaches Jupiter and makes a request. Buenos Aires, he says, is drowning in corruption and greed and moral rot. He needs thunderbolts, divine thunderbolts, to cleanse the city, to burn away the filth and start fresh. Jupiter agrees. Urigen descends from the heavens, armed with lightning, and then he uses it, and Buenos Aires burns to the ground. Because the joke, the dark, cutting, political joke at the heart of this film, is that Urigen is the corruption. His solution to the rot is destruction. He doesn't save the city, he incinerates it. The man who promised to clean house just sets the whole thing on fire. In 1917, 70 minutes animated by hand. This film premiered on November 9th, 1917 at the Teatro Splendid in Buenos Aires. Reviews were positive, audiences loved it. It ran for several weeks, which for a film in 1917 was a solid commercial run. People had never seen anything like it. They'd seen short animated clips, sure, but a full story, characters you could follow, political jokes that landed like actual punches, 70 minutes of it, and quietly, without fanfare, without a press release, without anyone in the world outside Argentina paying particular attention. History had been made. The world's first animated feature film had just been screened, and Walt Disney was only 11 years old. Cristiani immediately started working on the second film. He was just 21 years old. He just made cinema history, and he had more stories to tell. Sin dejar rastros, Without Leaving a Trace, released in 1918. This one was about a diplomatic scandal that had been dominating Argentine newspapers during World War I. Argentina was officially neutral, and in that neutral position, Argentine merchant ships were being sunk by German submarines. A German telegram had been intercepted, sent by Germany's ambassador to Argentina, Count Karl von Luxemburg, advising Berlin to sink Argentine ships, and I'm quoting directly here, without leaving a trace, sin dejar rastros. The leak of the telegram had caused an international incident. Cristiani turned it into a feature-length animated satire. The film premiered, people bought tickets, it screened. One day later, the Argentine Ministry of Foreign Affairs seized every print. Argentina's official position was neutrality. The film was a diplomatic liability. The government took every copy, and the film was never seen publicly again. The prints were never returned. The world's second animated feature film lasted exactly one day in theaters. Now we skip forward to 1941. World War II is underway. The United States government is running a program called the Good Neighbor Policy, an effort to strengthen cultural ties with Latin America, partly to make sure South American countries didn't align with the Axis powers. Part of that program involved sending American cultural ambassadors south, artists, musicians, filmmakers, including Walt Disney. Disney visited Buenos Aires in 1941 on an official tour, and while he was there, someone arranged for him to see some of Cristiani's work. Not El Apóstol, that was already gone by then, but his short films and later work, including a 1938 animated short called El Mono Relojero, The Clockwork Monkey. Disney watched it. Then he asked to meet Cristiani personally. By 1941, Quirino Cristiani was 45 years old. He made 3 animated feature films. He created a film processing laboratory in Buenos Aires, Laboratorios Cristiani, that was a successful, thriving business. He spent 4 decades building a life in Argentina. Disney offered him a job, come to California, work at Walt Disney Studios in Burbank, join the team that had just made Fantasia, Pinocchio, Bambi. Cristiani said no. He stayed in Buenos Aires. His lab was doing well. His life was there. He had no reason to leave. I think about that decision sometimes. How different the history of animation might look if he'd said yes. Before the fires, before the loss, there was one more film, Peludópolis, released September 16, 1931. Again, targeting Eurasian, whose nickname El Peludo gave the film its title, Peludópolis, the city of El Peludo. But here's the thing about Peludópolis that most people don't know. It wasn't just another animated film. It was the world's first animated feature film with synchronized sound. 4 years before Disney's engineers were wrestling with how to add music to cartoons, Cristiani had already done it. He used a system called Vidaphone, sound recorded onto a phonograph disc, synchronized to the film projection. Argentine cinemas at the time didn't have optical sound equipment yet, so he worked with what existed. But the production was a disaster in the slow motion. Cristiani had started filming in 1930, halfway through production. Argentina had its first ever military coup, General José Felix Iraburu, who overthrew Eurasian, the very man Cristiani was satirizing. Iraburu arrested Eurasian, who was old and sick. Suddenly, Cristiani's political satire was targeting a deposed, imprisoned, visibly declining old man. He had no choice. He stopped production, rewrote the script, added new material targeting Iraburu's military government. By the time the film finished and released in September 1931, public sentiment had shifted. People felt sorry for Eurasian now. The satire felt cruel. The film bombed. Cristiani's lost a significant amount of money on a project he already restructured once. And then the fires. The first fire was 1926. Federico Valle's studio vault in Buenos Aires. The nitrate prints of El Apóstol burned. Everything Cristiani had made from 1917, gone. The second fire was 1957. Laboratorios Cristiani, Quirino's own film processing lab and archive, caught fire. The original drawings, the negatives, the documentation of his entire career burned. Now the third fire was 1961. What had burned in 1957 burned now for sure. 3 separate fires over 35 years. There's not a single frame of a moving image from Apóstol that exists anywhere on Earth. Not a second, not a clip, not a work print in a vault somewhere waiting to be discovered. Film historians have looked. Archives have been searched. The rumors that occasionally circulate online, that a copy surfaced in Italy, that a print was found in a private collection, are false. All of them. What survives is a handful of still photographs, some press clippings from 1917 Buenos Aires newspapers, the original design caricatures of Diogenes da Borda, a promotional poster, and the fact now permanently part of the historical record that it existed. For most of the 20th century, Quirino Cristiani's name appeared in almost no English language animation history. Disney's Snow White from 1937 was called the first animated feature film in textbooks, encyclopedias, studio press materials, not out of malice exactly, more out of ignorance. Nobody in Hollywood had looked south. It was not until an Italian-Canadian animation scholar named Giannalberto Bendazzi who changed that in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Bendazzi tracked down Cristiani, who was in his 80s by then, living quietly in Bernal, a suburb of Buenos Aires, and sat with him, interviewed him, documented everything he could before it was too late. Bendazzi wrote the definitive biography. He later produced a 2007 documentary, Quirino Cristiani, The Mystery of the First Animated Movies. By then, Cristiani had been dead for over 20 years. He died on August 2nd, 1984 in Bernal, Buenos Aires province. He was 88 years old. He never received an Academy Award. He was never invited to speak at major animation conferences. His name does not appear in most general audience stories of the art form he pioneered. He lived long enough to be rediscovered. He died before that rediscovery reached the rest of the world. Cristiani didn't get cancelled. He didn't get censored by a government or picketed or buried by a corporation. He got erased by fire. 3 separate fires. And the cruelest part, the part I keep coming back to, is that the film that wasn't lost because it was dangerous. It wasn't pulled because it embarrassed someone powerful. It burned because storing film in 1926 was just combustible. Nitrate film burns. Vaults catch fire. History is fragile. Sometimes things are not found because someone hid them. And sometimes they're not found because nothing is left behind. What Cristiani built, 58,000 drawings, 70 minutes, a story about a politician who burned his own city down while trying to save it, existed once. That's real. That's documented. The premiere happened. The audience laughed. The projectionist ran the reel. We just can't see it anymore. Quirino Cristiani, born in 1896 in Italy, died 1984 in Argentina, made the first animated feature film in history, was offered a job by Walt Disney, and said no. This is the first of many. Every country has a Quirino Cristiani. Every film movement has something that burned, got seized, got locked in a vault. Animation history is full of things that existed and then didn't. That's what the channel is about. Not just the stories they buried, but the stories that didn't survive. If you want more of that, you know what to do. I'm Boxhead, and this is Boxhead 404, and we're just getting started.